That is So I think people on YouTube are now hearing me. I hope so. Right? Because I did disconnect my external speaker, but I think it was my mic unmuted without my knowing because I did unmute it before. So I hope you all on in YouTube are hearing me. So let's begin. The topic for discussion, or that I will be elaborating or sharing with you all tonight or right now, is the number one mistake that makes students fail CSEC, CXC as we know it, but that's the examination body, and how to avoid it. Now, this particular mistake has different elements, it has different parts. So before I share anything else, just to give you all an idea of what to expect during the course of this broadcast or this live, I will be sharing as briefly as possible my story, how I went from academic failure, and how I learned to avoid failing entirely. I will also share what that number one mistake is that I see students make, and some of it I used to make as well. That's when I used to fail years ago, and also how to avoid it. What you need to avoid the mistake, because think about it. If you have done examinations before, right? If you have written exams before and you failed, and you write again, whether it is you are doing it on your own, like self study, right? Or you are studying with an institution, if it is you keep failing over and over, you need to sit and think, what is the cause of that failure? Now, how some people would blame teachers. Now, sometimes it could be the teacher. But what I'm going to share my story would show you all, once you understand what it takes to succeed with a teacher, well, if you need one, or without a teacher, if you have self-discipline, you will still succeed. So here's my story. When I was in primary school, a young girl, I disliked studying. And I know a lot of students may share that same sentiment, that same should I say, may have that in common. They just don't like to study because studies is boring. Thanks everyone who like it on TikTok. You don't forget to share as well, right? Yes, studies used to be boring. Okay. And as a result of that, I disliked studying. I never used to study, which resulted in me failing over and over again, not just one subject, but all my subjects. And this was more so in primary school, right? And this happened for about two full school years, every end of term, until when I was in my last term in standard 3. And my teacher pulled me aside one day and he said, Michelle, if you fail again, you will have to repeat the entire year. And I was scared, to say the least. I did not want to repeat the year. So I told my grandmother, who was alive at that time, and she being a person who had her own relationship with God and stuff, and believed that, God could do anything. She took me to God in prayer. Because she realized that nothing else was not working for me. I just needed to change my attitude and take my work seriously. So she took it to God in prayer. Somehow God responded and answered, because I started to take my work serious. Now, I'm not saying that I went from being unserious to 100% serious in 1 minute, but I started to make a little more effort in my work. And over time, that improved. In addition, also hired one of her sons to teach one of my siblings and I mathematics, because that was his specialty, right? So when that occurred, I went from failing that term, well, the terms before, to a grade D, and I was awarded most improved. That was around 2004. So, and then 2 years later, when I wrote SEA, some people, if you're from Trinidad and Tobago, you know what SEA is, right? Secondary examination assessment. So the exam we normally write, we are placed into, let's say, the most suitable secondary school. And after that, my grade went from a DS to a C, By the time I graduated, it was a B, and I got most improved again. So I went from someone who was failing every end of term. In fact, I had a small group of family members who used to laugh and mock me because of that. Sometimes you have enemies here and there, right? So I had that going on. But when I started to do well, they were nowhere to be found, right? And just to fast forward, by the time I was in high school, I was still in maths lessons. So by that time, I was in math lessons for, I would have been 3 years. And when I was in Form 2, my grade, when I wrote essay in 2006, my maths grade was around 76. It went from failure sometimes to, what you call it? Sometimes I used to fail, and then there were times, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my. Sometimes I used to fail, and then sometimes I used to get like 50 or close to 50 marks, right? So after that, what happened was, as I said, when I wrote maths in 2006, I got around 76. That's what I recall from my grade. But because I was still in classes, I'm not saying you need to be in classes to succeed, but sometimes because of me personally, I needed other people to push me. Sometimes some learners need either an adult or a family member or someone who will be there for them, encouraging them or allowing them to um do what they need to do. Now you can't force nobody to do anything, but um I would not say that schoolwork went from being on boring or not, but it was still from time to time, it was not always the most enjoyable thing. Okay, you'll just give me one moment, please. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that, you all. I just had to fix something. It fell down there. So back to what I was saying. And by the time I was in Form 2, my second year high school, my maths grade was 98, 99, 100. Now, my grandmother could have said, well, she's doing well, take her out of those extra lessons. But thinking back at it now, I'm not going to lie. If she did say to take me out of lessons, I would have been happy, because sometimes it used to be, sometimes you have days you don't feel like going lessons because, again, it's not always the most exciting thing. But she didn't. And because she didn't, my maths grade never dropped less than 98. And I kept that mark consistently until I wrote CSEC CXC Mathematics in May, June of 2011. And by the grace of God, I was able to get a grade 1 with all A profiles, which we love to call a distinction. CSEC don't call it a distinction, but we like to call it a distinction. And I also was awarded for topping my school that year in maths. So I went from someone who used to fail, people used to laugh at me, yes, to someone who did pretty well. I mean, that wasn't the only subject I got a distinction in that year, but not going to say too much, right? So that's briefly my high school story. Now I could continue giving you a story about CAPE and then university. I think I'll come to that later on. But for right now, I have an understanding. I was a person who used to fail, and then I went from, failing to getting ones and passing all my CSEC subjects. So I often tell people, even some of my students, I say, listen, it all starts in the mind. If you believe you could do something, you will do it. But if you are struggling with your belief, you could work on your belief system. And I was sharing that with some of my students because I have classes ongoing. I was sharing that with some of my students last night, right? And night before as well, giving them some tips to help them if they are struggling with believing in themselves. So I am now going to share what is the number one mistake that students make that causes them to fail CSEC exam. Now, I'm not saying this is a mistake for everyone, right? Don't get me wrong, right? Everyone is different. Sometimes it could be other circumstances, which I could always speak about in another video. But for today, I'm focusing on a mistake that I see as number one, and there are multiple parts or segments to this mistake, or there are multiple things you could do that could lead to this mistake. So it's not just one thing could lead to this mistake. This mistake has multiple parts. Some people may make one part of that mistake and they still fail, or they may be, should I say, based on their behavior in terms of their studies, it may be all of the different components that makes up the mistake. So that mistake is called inconsistency, or we could say lack of consistency. So for people who don't know what inconsistency is, it has to do with not doing something regularly. In this case, we are going to tie it to examinations and studies. Inconsistency when it comes to studies could mean that you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing regularly. And trust me, every year I teaching, from since I've been teaching, I will encounter one or a few students who behave like this. And I'll share with you all in a more clearer form exactly what those inconsistencies can look like. So the first one is gaps in learning. What is that all about? So let's say, for example, a student joins a class and they want to write. We know the next set of exams that we are preparing for. Some people are preparing for January, CSEC, January 2026, CSEC, or May, June 2026. So there are persons who are gearing up themselves for those exams. What is inconsistency going to look like? It is going to look like you start a class, right? You started studying and then you skip classes. Now, if you skip class once in 3 months, that's not bad. But if you skip in class every other class, you miss in a class, or 2-3 times a month you miss in class, and on top of that, if that school that you're with doesn't, well, you're missing out a lot. And if the school does provide recordings, as we do, then you supposed to know, as a student, you're supposed to review what you missed to catch up with the class, because every class you miss, you are going behind. So I see students do that from time to time. Let me share with you a story. Not this year, last year for May, June 2024. I had a student who did this. This student started classes within a good time frame, had pretty much a lot of time before exams to prepare. But you know what that student did? That student was inconsistent. They stayed away from classes for a few months, and I thought the student was not going to return to class or resume classes. But then a student reached out to me and said, Miss, I wanted to resume classes about 2-3 months before exam, and I'm already alarmed here, because I know when people are inconsistent, the possibility of them passing or failing is like almost equal, because now you have to catch up with all those work for months that you missed, the gap between you starting classes, staying away from classes for a couple of months, and now resuming before exams. And I remember in April last year, because sometimes I do check up on the student, and the student was not always, even though when they resume classes after before exams, that student was not always in class. And as I said, when it's online classes, we provide recording. So I would reach out to that student one or a few times a week and ask that student, are you, going through the recordings? I'm not seeing any homework. You're not submitting anything. What is going on? That student told me around late April, early May of 2024. The student said, my pressure is high. So I asked the student, okay, so I was confused, like, why is your pressure high? What is causing your pressure to be high? The student said to me that they have been doing all-nighters for almost a month. their pressure is high, they're stressed and stuff. And I told a student he should not be doing that. I mean, that happens sometimes when students wait last minute to revise for exams. And then they stress out themselves to the point where she now had to stop studying for a while, which is not going to affect how she would perform in the exam. I think a lot of students don't take that into consideration. Whether you are, let's say you're supposed to be in classes for 12 months, or you're supposed to be in classes for 8 months, or you're supposed to be studying for 6 months, right? Learning the material, understanding, practicing, and so forth. But you decided, okay, I am going to miss a few of these months, and then you resume classes or you resume studying very close to the exam. And we'll say when the subject is difficult, meaning you have a lot of content to cover, like maths, you are doing yourself injustice, literally, because it's not easy to recover from maths in a short period because there's so much to learn. I tell students over and over, when it comes to maths, it's not just form 4 and form 5 work you learning. You have to also know certain basics that you were taught years before that in primary school, in lower form, and secondary school. So that gap in learning, being inconsistent by showing up when they want. Now, I had another student last year as well, right? But this student, whenever that student missed class, especially for online sessions, that individual will always watch recordings. And you all want to know how I knew that student was watching recording? That student would message me 1 a.m. in the morning, and I sleeping. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, this student messaged me and telling me, okay, I did my work, me send me photos, will ask questions. And I knew that student was doing their work in comparison to the other one who was hardly submitting anything and also not being in classes but for longer periods. So what am I saying? Am I saying that skipping class entirely could lead to you obtaining fail grades? Not quite. If it is a case where, because I teach adults as well, I don't just teach students who are in secondary school, I teach adults as old as 45 years and different age range. As long as someone is willing to learn, I teach them, right? So sometimes some of those adults, they have a busy schedule because they have a family life. They what else? They have a job. Some of them may have two jobs. And I understand that it's not always easy for them to be in classes. But there are some adults as well that I see they are just inconsistent for all the wrong reasons. And then there are some adults, even though they may not always be in class, they still look at recordings, they ask questions, they submit their homework. And the ones who do that, even though they are not in classes often, are always the ones who perform well. So that was one of the things that some students find themselves doing, that gap. Now, I know some people deal with financial constraint. Like when I was studying in university, there were times I didn't always have money, but I learned from a couple of business owners. Even if you don't have money, you could get money. Whether it is you ask someone to help you, whether it's a family member or a close friend that you have a good relationship with and they trust you, or they care about you. And there's also financial institutions that are willing to lend a certain amount. When they don't have a credit score or record for that individual, they would lend you. Some institution would not lend you at all, but some of them would lend you, especially if you have a work and you are asking for some money borrowed for educational purposes. They may lend you a small amount just to test you or to see if you will repay. But if you have you have that lending history as an adult and you study, you will get money. That's the whole thing about it. So some people use finances as an excuse, and even if you have financial problems and you started a class with an institution and you are unable to continue, you need for yourselves to continue studying on your own. We live in an era where there's so much digital platforms that there's free resources on Google, YouTube, there's Scripty, there's quizzes, there's quizzes, there is all kind of different platforms, like literally, that students can engage with, whether they have money or not, to help them cover the syllabus and also at the same time be prepared for their exam. So anyone could choose to make an excuse if they want to, but as I like to say, with me, success is a must. As I share with you all who have been listening, I went from failing to succeeding, and within the last 6 7 years from today ago, I was able to learn what it takes to never fail. And I have been applying those techniques to my studies while I was in university. And if I intend to go back, return and study some additional degrees and stuff like that, I will apply those same techniques, success techniques, because they worked already. I often share those things with some of my students to help them achieve their academic success. Some of them take my advice, and then have others who just, go through one ears and come back out the other. The next element of inconsistency is last minute studying. Oh boy. I know, like, listen, when I used to perform ballet in school, I used to study last minute too. I'm not saying no, but as I grew older and I matured, eventually I started to be a little bit more disciplined, prioritizing time, planning my study sessions weeks before exams to ensure that I perform well. I often tell students, you see, mathematics, it's one subject you cannot cram. You can try cramming it and you may think you crammed it, but you cannot cram. And if you don't know what cramming is an attempt to study last minute. Normally it's 48 to 24 hours before an exam, and persons who cram would usually only go through the content that they learn for a subject once or twice for the most. And I'm telling you, when I used to be revising for exams, the least amount of times I need to revise or review the information before writing the exams and getting like an A grade is 4. If you revise or cram less than 4 times before an exam, you are likely to go blank. So I've heard students told me before, Miss, I went to an exam before and I went blank. And I said, okay, so how much times did you revise? Because that is what it's tied to. If you don't revise enough, you don't remember enough. But if you revise enough, you will remember enough so that you can complete your exams and get that pass grade that you desire. So that's the thing, last minute cramming. Now, I'm not going to be tell you last minute studying doesn't work at all, but it's not the wisest thing to do. From what I've seen before, last minute studies could work for very easy subjects like principles of business, which is just reading and understanding, but then you're still stressing out yourself when you are revising last minute, right? But mathematics, no way, no day. If you attempt to cram that, you have to cram the formulae over 70 something formulae. You have to cram what else? What's the next thing you need to cram if you are cramming mathematics? You have to cram how to do the user formulae, which questions the user's formulae in. And if you cram in last minute, you are unlikely to have enough time to go through everything, and you get stressed out and you might just want to rest on that book, and then you go in the exam, you are nervous, you don't have confidence, because confidence comes with practice. The more you practice anything, the better you become at it, the faster you are able to do it, right? Okay, I know some people have been off and on, but if anybody wants to share questions at any point, you could, once it is in connection with the topic that I am currently sharing or discussing with you on. So another element of inconsistency is skills need repetition. I shared this on Saturday. I was talking about music, but regardless of if it is music, if it is you are learning to cook, you are learning to what to do design, graphics, you are learning coding, anything you want to remember to become good at, you want to master in life, you need to repeat it until you can remember it without having to think too hard, or until you can remember it mentally. And that's the thing. Some students may be wondering, okay, how do I know I'm prepared for an exam? Well, of course, as long as you learned everything, you are almost prepared, but more so, you need to know for yourself. Have you practiced enough until you are able to answer questions without opening a book and looking back, and all that information is in the brain? Because as most people know, when you are in the exam room, you cannot just be thinking. So you have to practice enough until you are able to answer those questions mentally or write them out without looking back. And until then, you know you are not ready. As for me, my figure is 4. It takes me revising something 4 times or writing it over 4 times to remember it without having to look back. Everybody is going to have a different number. Some people it might be 3 times, some people might be 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. But you would only know that the more you practice. That's a more personalized thing, because some people are slow learners, some people are medium learners, some people are fast learners. Slow learners take longer to remember what they learn. Medium learners are in between. Fast learners are really quick. So it really depends on the individual. Another element of inconsistency which leads to failure is confidence drop. So some students they didn't prepare enough, which leads to them being stressed out, and then they are anxious, and when they are in the exam room, they can't think properly, they can't focus well. And the only thing that can help you with that is a lot of practice. Because as I said before, the more you practice anything, the more you remember it, the faster you're able to answer those questions. The fifth element of inconsistency that leads to failure. Now, this is going to take discipline. I just tell my students, and any of my students, present or past, will tell you, especially those of them who have been in my class often, will tell you that I tend to tell them that it is important to prioritize classes. Now, as I said, some people could study without classes because they have that level of discipline, but have some people who need to be in a class to study. So if you are in classes, you need to prioritize your classes, be there as much as possible. If you miss a class, make sure you catch up from what you missed. Apart from that, you also need, if your classes or your tutor provides practice questions or assignments, do those practice questions, because it helps you to see if you really understand what you learn, and also is additional practice to help you retain and remember what you learn. And again, in order for anyone to do well in an exam, is what's in your brain, is not what's in the book. So you have to practice, and with more practice, you become better. I also tell students, the more you learn, especially with math and difficult subjects, but any subject, the more you learn, you have to prioritize time to revise. Revision is the key to remember what you learn. And if you want to remember what you learn and you want to perform well, you have to revise. Whether it is half an hour every day, half an hour, 2-3 days for a week, you have to prioritize. And it really depends on what grade you are aiming towards. Different grades require different level of effort. So if it is you looking for as for CSEC and so forth, something say what's a grade 3, depending on the subject, a grade 3 may take, I'll just give you an average. Another day I'll go into more specifics if you all want me to, right? But to get a grade 3 in POB, it will take approximately, it's not a lot of time, it depends on the individual, 20 to 60 hours total of learning and revising, because POB is pretty easy. English, in order to do well in English on average, it will take about 40 to 80 hours, which includes learning the subject, whether it's in classes, revising, assignments. When it comes to mathematics, It takes about 210 hours to get a grade 2 if you are fast. And if you are slow and you spend that same time, you might get a grade 3. And if you want to get a grade 1 and you are slow, you might have to spend 300 hours. So some students don't know all that. Right, and that's why I tend to give students advice when they come to me and let them know, okay, listen, the amount of effort you put in for English, you have to double or triple or multiply that by a certain amount to do well in maths, right? Because mathematics requires more effort. Now, I haven't been seeing much going on Facebook, right? But I saw on my other device, I was seeing people, but for some reason on my tablet, I'm not seeing the people on Facebook. So if there's anyone asking anything on Facebook, I am so sorry. For some reason, I don't know why I was seeing one thing on my Facebook browser, but not on the device itself. And I see someone is live or on YouTube. Welcome to you. Don't forget to like, share, because there are people who don't know. And as I said before, if you have failed before or you are underperforming, you have to think to yourself, what is the cause? What is causing me to fail? Is it something with me? Is it something with your teacher? Is it something with the school environment? Is it something with your home environment? Because there are so many different factors. I am just sharing one major factor that has multiple parts that could lead to failure that I've seen before. So, just to quickly summarize what inconsistency looks like to students, it looks like attending class one week, then skipping the next, and skipping and going and coming and going, and it's like you are not always in classes as you should be. So, you have probably an average or very low attendance rate. Another element of inconsistency that leads to failure for students is studying hard or a lot before tests, then doing nothing after. So if you have a mid-term or a mid-semester or end of term test, you're studying really, really hard, 1, 2 days or a week or something before. But after that, you just relaxing and having a wonderful life. That is problematic, especially for difficult subjects. Another inconsistent, well, should I say example of inconsistency that leads to failure is starting assignments but not finishing them, or not doing assignments at all, or doing assignments and not submitting them. So your teacher is unable to give you any feedback and you don't know whether you're doing the questions correctly or not. Especially in cases where some teachers don't review homework questions or assignment questions in classes. Apart from that, another one is reviewing some topics often but ignoring others. You know, sometimes some students might find some topics are easier than others, so they stick to reviewing those and then they leave out the ones that are difficult. You have to be able to, okay, if you are well in a particular subtopic or topic in a subject, you need to also prioritize time to study those topics that are difficult, because especially when you're looking to get a grade 1 requires more effort than a grade 2. And similarly, a grade 2 requires more effort than a grade 3. Each grade has different levels of effort, consistency, work, and everything that needs to be done. So students need to keep those things in mind. And then practicing questions today, then leaving them for weeks. So like practicing once in a while. That is not the best strategy for success. And a last one I want to share is not keeping up with when you miss a call or materials are provided. Call as in attending classes, you're not up with recordings and more, right? So I shared part of my story, which I think some people would have heard at the beginning. I'm going to share another part. So I'm not going to reshare the full thing that I shared before. For those who missed it, I'll just say I said that I used to fail for about 2 and a fraction of a year when I was in primary school. I went from getting F overall to getting D, B, C. The D was within a term, and then the C and B was within a year or two. And then I graduated from CSEC a couple of years later with distinction with a distinction in maths, a distinction in principles of accounts, and I got my other subjects as well. Um, so I know I didn't really plan to talk about key, but the reason why I'm saying this is to show you how inconsistency can affect your grades, right? If it is you are studying and you're distracted by social media, right? Social media could be a distraction. Trust me, when I was in high school, it used to be a distraction, but now as an adult, I have learned how to, give social media its time, and I also prefer to use social media for let's say business. Most of the times I'm on social media, I'm posting something that's business related, to be honest. Good evening, Brittany on Facebook. Welcome to you. I know I saw people watching on Facebook, but some reason on my tablet, I'm not seeing it showing up. It's so weird. But yes, what I was saying again is because of distraction, I went from a student who was failing to performing well, and then I failed again. But then a couple years later, when I was a young adult and I was starting university and stuff, and I said to myself, the reason why I'm sharing this, I know I didn't plan to share with university, but I'm telling you all how I went from a person who used to fail, and I have a formula, something that I have used and I share with my students from time to time, that is important for success. If you know these success tips and tricks and strategies and you actually do them, there is no way you can fail in life again. And that's what I did. I said to myself, I wanted to get honors. I know getting honors was not an easy task, but I said to myself, being someone who is in the teaching career, I wanted to prove to my students that if I could do it, you could do it. So I did it for my students, not necessarily 100% for me. And that's why I could now share with them how I was a person who used to fail and I got all these different distinctions. But what I want to say is this, right? When I was studying at university, there were times I would be in fully online classes. There were times I would be in physical classes. There were times I was in self-study classes. Because me personally, I like my schedule to be flexible. So whenever I got fully online or self-study, I will do that because of my schedule. Everybody's different. Some people tell me, Miss, I need to be in a physical class. Or some people tell me, Miss, I like online. Or some people tell me, I just want self-study. So everybody's different, right? But what I'm saying is, there were times I would sit in these classes, listen to these lecturers. There was a lecturer who was teaching me course on managerial accounting. Lord have mercy, that was one of the second to last courses I had to do. And I am listening to this teacher regurgitating information and tell us, put this here, and it had some maths in that because it's accounting. So it had some maths in it. And the teacher said us, put this here and put that there. I'm like, Miss, I don't understand. Like, why am I putting this here and that here? And that teacher was not the best teacher, but regardless of that lecturer not being the best, I made sure that lecturer's ability to teach was not going to affect my grade. My aim was I needed to get a grade A, and the least I would settle for was a grade B. So guess what I did? I would do my assignments. I would read. Did I? Yeah, we used to have these textbooks. So yes, I would have read certain parts of the textbook. I'm not coming to say I read the entire textbook. I didn't, right? But I would read the relevant or important parts of the textbooks that will help me with those questions. I would sometimes do research on YouTube. Like, listen, make YouTube your best friend. I've heard that in university, and sometimes I may tell students that because there are a lot of free resources. And something I learned from university is this: if you really want to understand a topic and you don't, apply broad learning. What is broad learning? It is listening to more than one teacher. So if you listen to one teacher and you don't understand the teacher 100%, listen to another teacher. You are most likely to hear the same thing that previous teacher said with that second teacher, but also you may hear something additional that the previous teacher didn't say. And then if you listen to the third teacher, you would hear probably almost the same thing again, but then you may hear something the others never said or something was left out. So each teacher you listen to on the same topic, you are likely to hear more, and sometimes it have the ones who explain it better than others. So that's what broad learning is about, not just saying, okay, this teacher can't teach, because I could have said, because that teacher wasn't teaching me well, I could have used that as an excuse to say, well, um, like I did in CAPE for economics. In CAPE, I did that, to be honest. So I'm sharing it with you. I'm just being very real and transparent. In CAPE, there was when I was doing economics, I didn't used to understand economics from that teacher at all. And that teacher could not teach from my understanding, but also at the same time, I was very distracted. Let's be real. I was on Facebook. I used to be wasting time and I was to be studying as much, which led to me failing CAPE economics for the first time. Like I never failed an examination before in terms of CAPE or CSEC. So that's the first time ever I failed a CSEC, CXC CAPE subject, right? But when I was in university, I had to redo that same subject again. And the teacher was a little better than the CAPE teacher, but I was more dedicated and determined to succeed. And because I was so determined, I was consistent, I would do my readings, I would do my assignments every week. I don't miss any of those things like I used to in high school from time to time. I can't remember what grade I got. I got either an A minus or a B, which I was satisfied because I said I went from someone who was failing because that subject used to be difficult for me in CAPE, right? Um, but I was talking about the course on managerial lecturer. Lord, put a hand. That lecturer used to be telling us, put this here, put that here, take away this, and it used to be so confusing. But as I said, at that point in my life, I was more serious about my work, and failure was not an option for me. I wanted nothing less than a grade B. I wanted all A's, and that is exactly what I did. There were times I see some students, and I've seen this year as well for May, June 2025. One or two students were putting extracurricular activities. They will put in leisure time above their studies. And you know what I used to do when I was studying, especially at those higher levels? I said to myself, yes, I love the entertainment, but I cut off watching movies sometimes for months, or playing games, or going arcade or wherever I used to go sometimes. I not necessarily arcade, but those game shops, because I like games too. Sometimes, come on. Sometimes we have to be a little human. So I made that sacrifice to say, listen, I don't mind missing these things for 3 months until I complete my studies and I got my grades, and then probably during vacation, sometimes I would, enjoy my vacation a little bit from time to time. So I think some students also, they prioritize the wrong thing. They're going all these events. They doing everything except putting their studies where it needs to be, and then they end up failing. I have to waste an entire year again to rewrite the same thing. I think people need to start developing this mentality. This is something that one of my cousins told me when I was about to now start university. He said, listen, you need to think to yourself that this thing is not forever. Studies is not forever. Well, that type of studies. It's not saying that I still don't study. I do study, but I do my own personal research and stuff. But in terms of formal school, studies don't have to be forever in that setting where you have to do an exam. And if you think like that, and you understand that every time you join a class, you are paying money, especially if it's not a scholarship winner or somebody's paying a grant or somebody's paying for you. Money is being wasted. Time is being wasted. Money and time are two, apart from family and friends, are two of the most valuable things in life, right? But everybody's different. To some people, money is more valuable. To other people, time is more valuable. To me, time is more valuable than money, because I've made a good amount of money. I'm not quoting figures. And I've lost money, right? And I've made money again. And the money thing is not always a big deal for me. But you see, time, if I waste a year studying, I fail, which I haven't in recent years. and I have to get these subjects, and I go back again to study and waste an entire year of my life when I could have taken my studies seriously and make the most out of it, put in the effort, get that subject and say, thank the Lord I did it, move on. I think some people not thinking about that. Money, you could lose money and get back money. That's happened to me many times. But you see, time, lost time cannot be regained. I think if some people start to think like this, they would take their studies more serious, because when you use your time wisely or efficiently, where it's not wasted, and you get your subjects, you can move on with your life. You don't want to be going year after year trying to get the same thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do that, but I think if people understand what is the cause of their failure and they work and fix those issues or those areas that are leading to failure, time won't be wasted and you can move on with your life. So all those things are important to think about when studying. Are you going to put entertainment about studies? You have time for them thing in life, right? You have time for them thing in life. And as I said, I made decision, tough decision to say, listen, when I studying and stuff, and it used to be so entertaining to be watching these movies 2, 3, 4 days sometimes, playing these different games, spending time with some of my close friends and families from time to time. But then when I started to study, especially when it was during those terms and semesters, I would say, listen, I am putting down this entertainment. If it's once a week, and sometimes I would skip a week, but sometimes I may not go an entire month without entertainment. And sometimes I study on Sunday to Saturday. I know everybody's different. I have some people who recognize days and different things, right? I have some people who wouldn't study on a Saturday, and that's a personal choice, right? Or some people, it might be a religious choice. But me, it had times I study on Sunday to Sunday, and then it have people who would vex something and say, okay, how you do so good? But I paid the price. There was a price paid. And I made sure, by God's grace, research, putting in that effort that I don't fail ever again. So I don't want to keep you back much longer. I just want to share how to avoid. I have shared it already, but I'll share it one more time in a more formal way. How to avoid or correct those mistakes that I mentioned before that can lead to failure in your examinations. So consistency is one of the keys. Those of you who follow Beyond Top Succeeders Academy on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or any platform, you will see from time to time, sometimes during a week, I would share something like last week I shared about discipline, because discipline and consistency works together, right? But what I'm saying is, if you are consistent, meaning you have that ability, if you start something, you stick with it, you work on it, you give it the time it needs, you prioritize, you can never fail. And that's what I was sharing briefly just now. I was sharing that I knew I had to make adjustments in my life because my studies were very demanding. And because my study was so demanding, I had to decide. If I wanted to fail, I would have continued watching movies 3, 4, 5 times a day and park up my studies, and then end of term or end of semester start to go crazy, as some people say, stressed out, anxious and stuff, and doing last minute studies, which I avoided as much as possible, because I was like, I'm not writing over these subjects. I am giving it my all once, and I just want to see A or B's for the least and move on, right? So some of the things that students can do to perform well in their education will be attend classes every week as often as possible. And if it is you cannot afford classes, as I said, they are free resources, but with the free resources, you need a syllabus. Like, you need to know what are the topics that will come. So if you are studying on your own and you have that discipline to study weekly on your own, you know what you need to study and you don't miss any topics. But if you can't afford, or you are in classes, whether it's free secondary school classes or it's paid lessons classes or whatever it is, attend your classes weekly and often. If you cannot attend all the time, if the classes provide recordings or materials that you can review from what you missed, go through it. Don't keep ending up behind, because the further behind you are, the more difficult it will eventually become to catch up. And then you may not want, you might say, okay, it's best I drop, or you might still go and write the exam, and then you might be disappointed in yourself. Studying a little every day instead of only before exam. The more you study a little bit every day, the more you remember. The more you remember, when it comes closer to exam, the less you have to study. Like you, it's so much easier, but then a lot of people don't see the fun in studying. But then we have no excuse now, because we live in an era now where there's all these different learning platforms. There's quizzes, there are learning videos on YouTube, there are different creative things that people provide online that is free that people could use. And each person have to know their learning style and utilize it. So it's important to practice your mathematics, English, or any other subject regularly. Right? Reviewing notes after class, or setting aside a certain amount of time for revision every week. Apart from that, building small daily habits, right? Um, so daily habits could tie back to what I was saying before, whether it's revising, whether it's practicing questions, whether it's studying, whether it is attending classes, doing assignments, and so forth. So consistency is one of the keys that people need to succeed. And what is it? It is steady effort, or continuous effort, or always putting in the effort every single week. It don't always have to be every single day, but at least a few times per week. And discipline meaning your ability to do what you need to do, your ability to attend classes, your ability to do your studies and everything. If you put those together, there's nothing that can deprive you from success. You will succeed, and I am not just telling you all this because I feel to talk, I'm also speaking from experience. So I'm not going to stay with you longer. But before I go, I need to make a few announcements. So I will be having a giveaway. Some of you are aware that there will be 5 winners from Trinidad. Well, not all from Trinidad, but the winners will be either people from Trinidad, Caribbean, and Caribbean islands. Once you follow the instructions, I'm saying that right. Some people doing all kind of halfway thing. I don't know why, but if it is you want to win classes, free classes, and you want to do well, if you're writing in January with these classes, or you write in May, June, and it could be a contributing factor to your success. Why not follow simple instructions on a giveaway post? To me, that not making any sense. So if you're not following simple instructions on a giveaway post, how do you expect to do well in a class? Anyways, so I supposed to come on 4 p.m. AST, that's Trinidad time, and a few other countries like Ghana, and so it's that same time zone. People who are in Jamaica and so forth, the time will then be supposed to be 3, but I had to make an adjustment because I forgot that I had another event to attend to. So I will be adjusting the time I will be coming on for the giveaway to 5 p.m. AST, which will be 4 p.m. EST. Right? So I will be on to do the live draw for the 5 CSEC winners of CSEC classes. Okay, so don't forget to share, and if you are one of those persons who are interested or you already participated in a giveaway, I hope to see you in the chat on Saturday. All right, I will be trying to be live on all the different platforms, but for people to see the actual draw, you'll need to be on YouTube. All right, so that is it for tonight. I hope you'll learn something. Don't be inconsistent. Success is connected to consistency. And I am urging or encouraging you all, if you already don't understand what consistency is after everything I went through tonight, and you want further clarification, you could do a YouTube search. You may not always see consistency in connection to education, but you might see consistency, different successful business people, sportsmen, speaking about how consistency is going to help you perform well. And listening to them, because I used to listen to people, like I still do from time to time, the late Kobe Bryant, or a lot of these successful individuals, and all of them have consistency. You cannot be successful without being consistent no matter what you do. So I hope you all learned something. I am about to leave you all to have a blessed night. So goodbye to Instagram. Goodbye to the people on Instagram. Goodbye to the people on Facebook. Goodbye to YouTube world.